Welcome to Eye on America. I'm Elaine Quijano. Michelle Miller is on assignment. From the rural farmlands of Minnesota to the concrete jungle of New York, today we're sharing the stories of the local heroes and reformers who are ensuring that their communities are taken care of. We begin in the American heartland, where much of our food is grown. But surprisingly, in those areas, buying food is becoming increasingly difficult. Janet Shamlian shows us how some Kansans are working to make sure their communities aren't harvesting food deserts.
Unlike many grocery stores in rural America, St. Paul, Kansas has one that will never shut its doors.
Who's your boss?
We actually have 6 of them. We have a mayor and 5 council members.
James and Kelly Voorhees run the only market in town, but the city owns it. A unique arrangement to keep food available.
You lived here when there wasn't a grocery store. What was that like?
It was pretty rough, actually. You learned to pack coolers with you everywhere you went because we're literally 17 miles to the next Walmart, closest grocery store.
40 million live in food deserts nationwide. In rural areas, that's at least 10 miles from a grocery store. More than 20% are low income.
The irony for many rural communities is that they are surrounded by farmland that's growing fresh food. There's just no access to it.
You guys see beans somewhere?
Tracy Keagle's Humanity House in Iola, Kansas feeds close to 2,000 people a month. Rural pantries just aren't as plentiful as they are in cities.
Without this resource, what would some of these families do?
They would starve. They would starve.
Tell Leona hi.
I'll do it.
When Lauren and Regina Lance learned their grocery store in Mildred, Kansas could close, they bought it.
If the Mildred store did not exist, where would they get their groceries or whatever they needed?
Most of them would have to drive at least 30 minutes in any direction.
Along with fresh produce and the usual grocery fare, they brought in nostalgic foods.
We smoke our own bologna.
And turned the deli into a destination lunch spot. Then they added a dance hall.
Was it a purposeful decision to make it more than a grocery store, to make it a destination?
Not originally. Originally it was to save the local store. And then it's metamorphosized into so much more.
When you hit that door, you feel like you're at home. That's the way we want you to feel.
Starved for food access, small towns relying on themselves.
There's never a day that goes by that somebody doesn't say, hey, we really appreciate you being here.
As groceries become the heart of America's heartland.
We now set the stage for a talented cast of artists who are proving that diversity goes beyond what you can see, especially when it comes to developmental disabilities. Gene Song shines a light on one theater company that's empowering neurodiverse communities.
Poses!
With drama,
We have a winner!
And songs that don't miss a beat. It's rehearsal night for these thespians with the nonprofit theater company Epic Players.
Not bad for a first try.
Sarah Kaufman is a performer and writer who was diagnosed with autism as an adult.
I have met so many neurodiverse and disabled people as being a part of Epic, and it has opened my world in this beautiful way and made me see that, like, there is so much value and so much art and so much wonder that comes out of these brains that work differently.
Thank you for giving our players so much love. Keep it up.
Artistic director Aubrey Therian founded Epic Players in 2016, bringing the mission of inclusion to center stage.
Can't be what you can't see. So it's really important for neurodivergent artists to see themselves represented on stage and screen and know that is a job that they can do. The arts are a viable employment opportunity. And right now, people with disabilities are severely unemployed in this country.
According to the U.S. Department of Labor, 19% of people living with a disability were employed last year. For people without a disability, that number jumped to almost 64%.
So if we really care about equity and inclusion, this is something that we'll work to mine together. So that's why we do what we do. We pay all of our artists to be involved in our shows. We continue to increase that pay as much as we can, and also find opportunities for our artists outside of Epic and advocate for them.
Life is pandemonium!
Connor Tagg is part of this year's Epic Players cast in the musical comedy 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee.
It's pronounced parfait. There's an accent they do.
I really think the industry should be more open to people who are neurodivergent or they have disabilities to play characters with disabilities. If it's people with autism or Asperger's, ADHD, or anyone who's deaf, what really matters is that they can do so many things despite all of that.
While the data can be limited, one study found only 2% of regular characters on scripted primetime television portrayed people with disabilities. And another report showed 95% of TV characters with disabilities were played by able-bodied actors.
And I think there's a fear that if we say stop casting neurotypical actors as neurodivergent characters, that the producers or directors or whatever is just going to hear stop telling neurodivergent stories. But I think it's just the message that we want to be sending and that Epic is sending is that keep telling these stories. Just include us. Let us help you tell them, because we're here and we're doing it and we've been doing it and we rock it.
And when we come back, we take a look at a food revolution that's powered by peas. You're watching Eye on America. Meat alternative products in restaurants and grocery aisles have become mainstream, but it's more than just a food trend. Nancy Chen shows us how the pea protein behind popular brands like Beyond Meat is changing the landscape for American farmers.
Near Times Square, one of the best joints for a burger with all the fixins isn't serving any meat. April Tam Smith is the co-founder of Pea's Kitchen. The vegan restaurant was one of the first in New York City to serve the brand Beyond Meat back in 2017.
I remember when we first opened, the questions were usually around, what's in this? Wow, it's really good. What am I eating?
Fast forward to today, as meat alternative products are creating new appetites for all.
The people who are coming in wanting to try this burger, are they vegetarian or are they meat eaters?
I would say mostly meat eaters. I think about 80% of our customers are just regular people who are just craving the burgers.
Changing the nation's taste buds isn't easy. While a recent survey found nearly 9 in 10 Americans eat meat as part of their diet, 25% say they're at least willing to try plant-based burger alternatives. That includes this Oklahoma girl.
So this is the Beyond Meat burger, and there's absolutely no meat in this.
No, not at all. It's made with pea protein.
All right. This is really good. It just tastes like a regular burger.
As for where much of it comes from, near the South Dakota border in Dawson, Minnesota, are the seeds of a food revolution. Brother and sister Tyler Lorenzen and Nicole Atchison had the largest pea protein plant in North America.
What exactly is pea protein?
Pea protein is protein that comes from peas, and not green peas, actually yellow field peas. There's actually 20% protein in peas, which is quite a bit for most vegetables.
A chance to change what we eat and how we farm.
Nicole, I was surprised to learn, even on the drive in here, I'm passing fields of crops, that those crops aren't necessarily going to people, and for the most part, they're actually going to livestock.
Yeah, and that's, I think, surprising for a lot of people, because as we drive around, we think, oh, look at all this food that we're making.
Purist works with a network of more than 400 farmers to source their pea plants. Peas are actually one of the most soil-nurturing plants you can grow, which is great for healthy crop rotations.
What does this mean for farmers in the United States these days?
And we've worked over the last 20 years to adapt varieties that can grow right in the heartland. Peas are typically grown in Canada, and so we've really adapted them to new climates, which gives farmers more revenue opportunities.
One of the biggest customers for their pea varieties is Beyond Meat, found not only in Pea's Kitchen, but now McDonald's, Taco Bell, and Panda Express.
It seems like the industry of plant-based protein has really gone through a revolution these past few years.
Yeah, I think the biggest change has been the products on the market really mimicking their counterparts that are coming from animal proteins.
With flavor and looks, pea protein is proving to be more than just a food trend.
The meat eaters that are coming in and trying these plant-based burgers, what are they seeking?
I think often it really is just genuinely delicious. You don't really feel like you're missing out on something. But at the same time, a lot of us are more aware of the environmental impact now. So it's really a win-win for the consumer, for the environment, and for our bodies.
Overharvesting, pollution, and disease wiped out more than 99% of a historic native oyster population in the waters of the Chesapeake Bay. But now marine experts in Maryland are rebuilding these oyster colonies, one shell at a time. Skylar Henry takes a closer look.
As the sun rises over the Little Choptank River, there's a crew hard at work, responding to a crisis underwater that's been unfolding for centuries. The declining population of the native Chesapeake Bay oyster. Inside each of these 3,000-gallon tanks are millions of future oysters. The work done by nonprofit, the Oyster Recovery Partnership.
And the work that we're doing is all in Maryland at this point, working in tributaries within the bay to restore those oyster reefs.
Leading the restoration effort, Executive Director Ward Slacum.
Oysters are important to the cultural heritage of Maryland. For one, oysters as being the keystone species, it means that they're really critical to not just the ecosystem of the bay, but all the other animals that reside in the bay. But the harvest of those oysters also contributes to the economy.
Maryland's seafood industry is responsible for bringing in nearly $600 million annually.
Hi, may I help you?
Businesses like Fadley Seafood in Baltimore, Maryland, are directly dependent on the bay's overall well-being.
Well, without the oysters, we don't have anything. We need that oyster to siphon and clean the water in the Chesapeake Bay.
Damie Hahn is the fourth generation running Fadley's.
100 years ago, our oyster population could do it in 24 hours. Our current oyster population takes nearly a year to do that same job that it could do in 24 hours. We can't do what we do in providing fresh local without fresh local. So the health of the Chesapeake Bay is key to our success. It's key to our future.
The Fadley family has owned and operated the market for more than 130 years.
Through the 1800s, early 1900s, the oyster industry was really what defined Baltimore. A lot of areas would backfill with oyster shells. They used crushed oyster shells. So we were using the shells, not realizing that they needed to go back into the bay.
It wasn't until the 1950s when scientists discovered the link to the bay's declining health.
We were depleting our supply, and that these oysters needed old oyster shells in order to grow new baby oysters, the spat.
But with the shells shucked and the oysters dressed,
A little dab of cocktail and a little squeeze of lemon.
there was no easy way to get the used shells back into the water.
Cheers. Cheers. Here you go. That's
so good.
fantastic. They are so good.
That's so good.
They're so good. Now we have to recycle these shells.
Fadley's is one of about 400 area seafood restaurants, markets, and public job sites that has been recycling their shells through the Oyster Recovery Partnership. ORP crews pick up the shells and bring them to the University of Maryland's Horn Point laboratory to be processed over the next year.
When we get the dirty shells, they're aged, they're clean, and then they're loaded into the containers and then placed into the tanks ready for us to start putting mature larvae in it.
Stephanie Alexander is the laboratory's hatchery manager.
They filter the water, they create habitat, they are also spawning and adding to the population. And they're also helping with shoreline stabilization as well as nutrient sequestration. So overall, they're extremely valuable. They're the little kidneys of the bay.
But these vital organs of the Chesapeake need some assistance to repopulate at the rate needed to keep the bay clean.
So what we have here is what?
We have a bunch of oysters that we don't know the sex of yet, getting ready to start their reproduction.
Around 25,000 adult oysters a year are rotated through these spawning tables.
They're filtering this water in, and they are tasting it to say, hey, somebody else is spawning, I need to start spawning in response. And it's a chain reaction. because they have to spawn at the same time in order for fertilization to take place.
In about 2 weeks, the fertilized eggs will be mature enough to be drained from their indoor incubators and gathered for their next stage in life.
Right now there's 5 million larvae in my hand.
The bundle of larvae will be set in one of the outdoor tanks that's filled with the recycled oyster shells. The goal? To get the larvae to attach to the shells, where they'll grow for life, a process known as spat on shell. After another week or so, they're loaded up onto a boat and released into the water.
And then when they're deployed, they go out there, they're put in reefs, is that correct?
They're put on reefs, which is basically a hard substrate, but we don't want to put them in the mud, because if you put oysters in the mud, they're going to sink and they're going to die, and then all of our efforts for nothing.
ORP says they've planted around 8.5 billion juvenile oysters back in the waters and have rehabbed reefs in 2 tributaries with 3 more to go, set to be completed by 2025.
There's a lot that goes into this funding-wise as well, right?
Absolutely. It's definitely a multi-million-dollar operation to restore oysters annually, in Maryland. And there's a huge commitment from the state of Maryland to provide that funding. NOAA also provides funds, and so does the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
But man-made challenges are once again risking the oyster's survival.
Historically, overharvesting and disease issues were kind of the big driver of the decline of the oysters. Now I think it's lack of suitable substrate, because as the land becomes developed, you have more runoff, and in that runoff you have more sediment, and that sediment is falling out and burying the oyster reefs. Shell is very limiting, so we need everything we can get. So there's little steps that everybody can get involved in. You can eat oysters, you can support oyster aquaculture farms, and just make it a big circle of oyster love.
Coming up, the greenery that's blooming throughout all corners of the concrete jungle. We'll be right back. The manicured lawns of New York City's Central Park or the curated flora of the High Line may be popular destinations for visitors, but it's the lesser-known community gardens that show the city's vibrant personality. And as Christina Ruffini found out, these hidden green spaces are sprouting more than just tranquility.
This is New York City, cramped, cluttered, plagued by loitering, overcrowding, and the constant buzz of bees?
I think it has the best part of New York because you never know what's going to happen next.
Tucked away in once unclaimed corners of the concrete jungle are actual jungles. Tended to by volunteers like Penny Jones, who's been planting in this Lower East Side plot for nearly 30 years.
What makes you come back here year after year and do all this for free?
I don't have to go to the country on the weekend. I'm 10 minutes from my apartment. No traffic.
The traffic waits just outside the gate, but inside there are bluebells and fish and, well, calm.
Why are places like this important? Like, why can't I just knock this down and make some condos?
For one thing, the lungs of the city, we provide a huge amount of oxygen and bring down the temperature.
The gardens throw some serious shade. More than 550 covering 100 acres of some of the most valuable real estate in the 5 boroughs. The city lets the gardeners use the land for free. In return, they must be open for the public. But the partnership wasn't always so pleasant.
What did this place look like in '73?
It looked like a barren desert. I mean, there was nothing here.
Donald Loggins is one of the original Green Guerrillas, a militant group of gardeners recruited by local activist Liz Christie to clean up the neighborhoods. The insurgency started with seed grenades, balloons filled with flowers and fertilizer.
We'd go around in the evening and throw them over the fences, and it worked.
Their tactics soon escalated, taking over this plot that would eventually become the city's first official community garden.
We had problems with people coming into the space and trying to deal drugs. One guy tried to rip off a branch from a tree. We chased him down the subway with pitchforks. He never came back again.
He probably didn't expect to get chased by pitchforks in Manhattan.
Probably not, but it worked. It kept him away.
And as the plants grew, so did the concept. All over the city, people began tilling their blighted blocks.
You want to get as much of the root as possible?
Today, the gardens are as diverse as the neighborhoods they represent.
Every garden is different. It's a reflection of the neighborhood and their needs and wants and wishes for what they want to make New York better.
Carlos Martinez is the deputy director of New York City's Green Thumb program, which helps provide seeds and support for the otherwise self-funded gardens.
If these weren't maintained by volunteers, would the city be able to keep up gardens like this?
It would be very difficult for the city to maintain so many gardens. So we really value all the blood, sweat, and tears that our gardeners put into this.
Originally from Colombia, Martinez says the gardens are popular with new New Yorkers looking to put down some roots.
Many of our immigrant gardeners join a community garden because they want to reflect of home.
At Tranquility Farms in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn,
it's the forsythia, which is the plant of New York City.
Ina McPherson brings a bit of her Jamaican heritage to this inner city soil.
I always say my mom raised us in an urban setting with rural sensibilities.
She teaches local kids where the food they see packaged and processed actually comes from.
This is arugula.
And shows them eggs from her brood of chickens, which she insisted we hold.
How do I put the chicken down?
I don't want to stick it like this and.
Yeah. All right.
She says the gardens bring value beyond plants and produce.
I mean, look what's going on in here. There's birds in here, there are trees. Nature abounds in here. And if you have all these green spaces, how are you going to live?
Living without them is a constant fear. While many gardens are protected, the threat of development is always there. Still, the once dirt-covered disruptors have been embraced by their communities, giving Loggins more time to tend to his thoughts.
It's so nice to come here and just enjoy yourself and realize, how green the city can be.
And peaceful. Well, some of the time.
Finally, as we close out our show, we take you along for a jog at our nation's capital. We meet the young girls who are running to build confidence and cheering each other on along the way. Here's CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell.
Early Sunday morning, these girls were on the run. With Girls on the Run, a nationwide program empowering 8 to 13-year-olds.
Hi, girls. I'm Nora. How are you?
I am the girl that's going to run.
I am the girl that's going to run.
They're taught they can accomplish anything, even crushing a cold morning run.
I love it. You guys are fast. Super fast.
We find that girls at the age of 9 begin to lose their confidence. We find that by age 10, they start to become less physically active.
The program has gone the distance. In its 25 years, it's served more than 2 million girls.
Who loves running? Me!
Ada, what are you learning from Girls on the Run?
I'm learning to never give up and to always keep trying.
And if empowering young girls isn't enough, each team does a community service project, like writing letters to children's hospitals.
What's a word that starts with E?
Extraordinary.
Wow! There you go.
That's awesome.
What makes you keep going?
My friends cheering me on and saying, you can do this.
Girls on the Run has helped me so much that I feel like nothing is in my way of winning that race.
For more features like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News, available across all platforms. I'm Elaine Quijano. Thank you for watching Eye on America.